January 18th, 1939, Queen Maud Land, Antarctica. A sun that never truly rises hangs low over the horizon, a dull copper disk suspended in a sky the color of frozen steel. Wind sweeps across the ice shelf in long, mournful strokes, each gust carrying shards of snow that sting like sand. The world feels abandoned, silent, empty, and impossibly vast. On the deck of the Schwabenland, Oberleutnant Victor Kraus tightens his fur-lined coat and peers toward the jagged white continent stretching before him. He writes in his logbook with numb fingers, "We have arrived at the end of the world. The ice speaks only in cracks and distant thunder. No man should stand here, and yet here we are." Below him, aircraft mechanics struggle to unfasten the bindings on the ship's catapult system. Steel clinks against steel in the bitter air. The Dornier Wal seaplane rests on the catapult rails like a silver gull preparing for an impossible flight. Its engines cough as the crew runs warm-up cycles, sending plumes of exhaust spiraling into the wind. The captain of the Schwabenland, Alfred Richer, stands nearby, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. He watches the preparations with an intensity that even Kraus, who has served with him for 3 years, finds unusual. The official mission is surveying, photographic passes, cartography, aerial mapping. But the secrecy, the special orders, the men in black coats who joined in Hamburg at the last minute, all of it feels like preparation for something deeper. And in Richer's eyes, Kraus senses the weight of something unspoken. A bell rings twice, engines roar. The catapult arm ratchets backward. The Antarctic wind whips across the deck as the Dornier's propellers slice the cold air. Richer steps closer to Kraus and says quietly, "This place preserves everything. Ice remembers." Kraus doesn't understand. Not yet. Minutes later, the catapult fires with a metallic scream. The Dornier leaps forward, skims the deck, and hurls into the air with a violent shudder before catching the dense polar wind. For a moment, the aircraft dips, then stabilizes, banking toward the glowing horizon. Inside the cockpit, Pilot Lieutenant Erich Voss presses the throttle forward until his glove strains against the metal. The aircraft groans, climbing slowly. His navigator, Emil Hartmann, squints through frost-covered goggles at the pale wasteland below. "God in heaven," Hartmann mutters. "It's like an ocean frozen mid-wave." Voss doesn't respond. The airframe vibrates as they pass 500 meters altitude. The ice shelf below stretches like a cracked mirror, broken only by jagged black cliffs emerging from beneath the snow. The sun's low angle throws long shadows across the ridges, creating the illusion of deep trenches. As they climb, the radio crackles with Richer's voice from the ship. "Dornier 1, report status." Voss presses the transmit switch, climbing to 800 meters, visibility. "Fair, wind moderate, continuing east-northeast." There's a pause on the line, followed by a second voice, someone Voss doesn't recognize. "Look for anomalies. Report anything unusual. Photographs required." The cold in the cockpit deepens, though the temperature gauge hasn't changed. Back on the Schwabenland, Kraus stands with binoculars, tracking the faint silhouette of the Dornier against the horizon until it becomes a speck, then vanishes entirely into the glare. Around him, activity continues. Men checking oxygen tanks, adjusting sledges, unpacking crates stamped only with code names. In the ship's lower deck, 2 civilians in dark coats spread a map on a table. The paper is weighted with brass instruments to keep it from curling in the cold. One points to a region inland where an uncharted plateau rises like a fortress from the icy plains. "We must ensure they reach this location," he says. "The Führer believes there is something there worth finding." The second man adjusts his glasses. "And do you believe it?" A long silence. Then, "I believe Antarctica hides many things, and whatever is hidden here will not be touched by time." Neither notices Kraus on the staircase above, listening through the steel railing. He feels a chill not born of the wind. Upon 200 meters above the ice, Voss levels the Dornier and begins the photographic pass. Hartmann opens the camera bay, checks the film spools, and begins firing the shutter mechanism. Each shot captures another sliver of the unfolding landscape. Crevasses glowing turquoise, mountains knife-edged and black, valleys buried under centuries of wind-packed snow. Then, something changes. "Voss," Hartman says, voice thin. Look ahead, 3 o'clock. The pilot cranes his neck. A line of cliffs rises abruptly from the plains, vertical, imposing, impossibly tall. But it's not the height that chills him. It's the symmetry. The cliff face is too straight, too perfect, miles long and rising like a colossal wall carved by hands, not nature. Voss swallows. That can't be natural. Hartman snaps photos rapidly, breath fogging the camera chamber. Should we report it? Voss hesitates. The second voice on the radio, the one that did not belong to Richer, echoes in his mind. Report anything unusual. He flips the switch. Schwabenland, this is Dornier 1. We've sighted a structure, no, a formation, unknown origin. Coordinates, static explodes through the speaker. A howl of interference. The radio goes dead. Hartman tries to adjust the knobs. What happened? The pilot doesn't answer. He's staring at something else now, something near the base of the cliff. A dark patch, a void, an opening, a cavern mouth, large enough to fly an aircraft into. Ice sheds from the cliff in drooping sheets, exposing smooth stone beneath, the color of old bone. Voss circles lower. The instruments begin to tremble. Eric, Hartman whispers, gripping the seat. I don't like this. The needles are jumping. The compass spins. The altimeter jitters. The engine coughs. The aircraft shudders violently. Below, the cavern yawns wider, a black wound in the continent, a doorway leading into the unknown. Hartman feels the hair rise on his neck. We need to go back. Voss nods slowly, banking the aircraft away. As they turn, sunlight glances off something partially buried near the cavern entrance, something metallic, a shape too geometric to be ice. Hartman snaps one final photograph before the plane stabilizes. Aboard the Schwabenland, Kraus waits with a cup of bitter coffee, tapping his boot against the deck in agitation. The horizon remains empty, just another endless sheet of white. The radio operator sits hunched over his console, adjusting dials fruitlessly. No signal, he mutters. They vanished off the air. Richer climbs onto the bridge, jaw tight. Keep trying. Below deck, the two civilians in black coats stand by the map again. They must have found it, one says quietly. The other nods. If they saw the entrance, they will not be allowed to return easily. Kraus hears those words as he passes by. He stops. Return from what, he asks. The men turn but offer no answer. Above deck, the faintest drone becomes audible, just a whisper of an engine, carried by the wind. A lookout points. Aircraft! Kraus sprints to the rail, binoculars raised. A small dot emerges from the glare. The Dornier, coming back. The deck erupts with movement, crew rushing to guide the seaplane in, medics preparing blankets, mechanics grabbing ropes. But as the aircraft approaches, something feels wrong. It flies unevenly. One engine sputters, ice clings to the fuselage in thick sheets, and in the cockpit, only one silhouette. Hartman, slumped, unmoving. Richer whispers, "Where is Voss?" The Dornier touches the water with a violent slap, skidding, spinning, nearly capsizing before stabilizing and drifting toward the ship. Men in parkas race onto the landing platform, hooking the aircraft and dragging it in. They wrench open the cockpit. Hartman's eyes are open, frozen, glassy, staring at something only he saw. His hands claw the seat. His lips are cracked, blue, twisted in a soundless scream. Kraus reels backward. God! A medic checks his pulse, shakes his head slowly. Richer leans close to the body. Something catches his attention, a strip of torn paper clutched in Hartman's fist. He pries it free. A fragment of a photograph, edges burned, image warped from cold, but visible, just barely, through the frost and scratches, the outline of a colossal cliff and a black entrance carved into the ice, too perfect to be nature. Richer turns pale. Kraus whispers, "What did they find?" Richer does not answer. He simply folds the torn photograph, slips it into his coat, and murmurs, "We go inland at first light." Night came slowly at that latitude, stretching itself across the sky in a long, pale twilight. When true darkness finally fell, it felt less like evening and more like the world being turned down to a lower setting. The wind never truly stopped. It only changed pitch. On the Schwabenland, Hartman's body lay in the improvised cold room, a formality since the entire world outside was a cold room. A sheet covered his face. The doctor wrote cardiac arrest under extreme stress on the report, then crossed it out and wrote nothing at all. Kraus stood there longer than he meant to, staring at the shape beneath the canvas. He remembered Hartman's voice in mess, laughing too loudly at bad jokes, complaining about the coffee. The silence now felt obscene. On a ship filled with the noise of engines, chains, winches, and wind, this corner was absolute stillness. He opened his notebook. Something is wrong with this mission. We came here for photographs and ice samples. Now, a man is dead, and no one will say why. The captain knows more than he admits. The civilians know even more. I suspect Berlin knows least of all, yet demands the most. He closed the book when the door creaked. One of the men in black coats stepped inside. He was tall, thin, spectacles misted from the temperature change. Kraus had heard his name once, Dr. Heinrich Malke. Affiliation never stated, but obvious enough. His papers carried the insignia of the Ahnenerbe, the SS study society that called itself scientific and behaved like a priesthood. Malke glanced at the covered body, then at Kraus. "You were close to him?" he asked. Kraus shook his head. "We flew together once, that's all." Malke nodded as if that settled it. "Then you will not object if we examine his effects." Without waiting for an answer, he approached the small locker where Hartman's belongings had been placed. Logbook, watch, a small packet of letters, a tin of cigarettes, the ordinary relics of a life interrupted. Malke ignored them. He went straight for the leather camera case. Kraus stepped forward. "That should go to the photographic section." Malke turned, the hint of a smile resting coldly on his lips. "And it will, after I have seen it." He unlatched the case, pulled out the last film canister, and held it up to the light as if he could see through metal itself. "The last minutes of his life are on this reel," Malke said. "We must ensure they are properly interpreted." The storm built itself during the night. By dawn on January 19, 1939, the horizon was gone, swallowed by a wall of blowing snow. The Schwabenland groaned under the strain of ice, loosening and tightening around its hull. Men chipped at frozen ropes with hammers, breath rising in ghostly clouds. In the cramped map room, Richer, Malke, and the second civilian, an engineer named Vogel, stood over a table entirely dominated by a single sheet, a newly developed aerial photograph, still damp at the edges, gently curling as it dried. It showed a cliff line, deeply shadowed, stretching across the image like a scar. Near its base, in a darkness that seemed to drink the surrounding light, lay the mouth of a cavern. Vogel tapped the edge of the print with a gloved finger. Scale places this at least 50 meters high, perhaps more. The entrance alone could admit a Zeppelin hangar. Richer's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. No volcanic activity this far inland, and the ice." "The ice moves," Malke interrupted. "It breaks, it reveals. Old things, very old things." There it was again. That tone, not scientific, not navigational, religious. Richer frowned. "Our mission is cartographic, survey work. You know this. Any further inland operation increases risk without—" Malke slid a different document across the table. Heavy paper, official red stamp. The eagle above the swastika glaring up through the lamplight. "New priorities," he said. Richer read quickly. Kraus, standing discreetly by the doorway as signal officer, could make out some of the phrases: "Any anomalous geological, archaeological, or artificial formations. To be treated as matters of highest state security. All decisions regarding such phenomena to defer to SS Research Command." When Richer reached the end, his face had gone pale under the windburn. "So that is it," he muttered. "We are prospectors now, not for whale oil, not for fat, not for land, for legends." Malke's eyes glittered behind his spectacles. "Legends are often misremembered realities, Captain. This continent has never been tamed. The natural processes here could preserve structures for centuries, millennia. If our ancestors touched this ice once, we should know." Kraus felt a surge of disbelief. "Ancestors?" he blurted, forgetting his place. "There is no record of any human settlement here. This place kills men in hours." Malke glanced at him with mild annoyance. "I speak not of the last few centuries, Oberleutnant. I speak of deeper time, of cultures whose traces may lie beneath the ice. Stone does not rot. If the Reich is to be a thousand-year state, it is not unreasonable to ask whether older thousand-year realms left their bones here. Richer closed his eyes for a long moment. The ship creaked around them. The storm hissed against the porthole. "This is madness," he said quietly. "Madness with a seal from Berlin," Malka replied. That afternoon, when the worst of the wind subsided, preparations began. The original expedition plan called for repeated aerial survey arcs, roughly 600 kilometers each, launching from the ship, photographing ice fields, then returning for refueling and plate development. No one had authorized a landward incursion. Now, everything changed. 2 Dornier Wall seaplanes remained operational. Fuel stocks had been calculated carefully, enough for a fixed number of flights, with reserve capacity for emergency landings and unexpected returns. Each engine consumed an average of 240 liters of aviation fuel per hour at cruise, more when climbing. The ship's tanks held approximately 600 tons of fuel, already diminished by the journey south. Vogel spread the numbers like cards. If we send 1 aircraft as a pathfinder and a second as a supply shuttle, we can support a small ground party no more than 80 kilometers inland for perhaps 2 days, maybe 3, before we must recall them. Beyond that distance, the risk of weather changes and fuel expenditure becomes intolerable. Malk nodded, as if this confirmed his own calculations. 80 kilometers inland is sufficient, he said. If we land on the plateau and approach the structure by sled, we can reach the entrance and return within the time window, provided we work efficiently. Provided the weather holds, Vogel added, provided the ice holds, provided none of our estimates are wrong. So, Richer said, nothing at all to worry about. No one laughed. That evening in the mess, the mood wavered somewhere between curiosity and dread. Rumors moved up and down the long wooden tables faster than the vegetable stew. Some said the cavern was an ice cave, a natural tunnel carved by meltwater. Others whispered of an old base from a previous secret expedition, abandoned and now rediscovered. Krauss heard both and believed neither. His notebook filled with small, angry lines. Whale oil was the excuse. The Reich needs fats. This is true. 70% of our edible fat still imported. The economists calculate, the Kriegsmarine escorts, the fishermen labor. This I understand. But these men speak not of fats or trade. They speak of relics and inheritance, as if the ice itself holds proof of their fantasies. Hartmann is dead because someone in Berlin wants the world to reflect their mythology. He paused when the cook set a plate in front of him. Potatoes, a thin strip of pork, bread hard at the edges. On paper, it was enough calories. In reality, it was a reminder. Germany did not have the luxury of waste. Every ounce of fat was accounted for in ledgers. Every barrel of oil had a name and a purpose. Scarcity drove them toward this frozen edge of the world, toward hypothetical whaling stations, new fishing grounds, resource claims. Scarcity and the ideology that insisted Germany must be self-sufficient, a fortress economy protected from blockade. Yet now the mission was steering away from economics and into mysticism. Krauss chewed and stared at the bulkhead, feeling a strange, hollow anger. The men around him thought they were on a scientific expedition. The reality, he suspected, was that they had been dragged into someone else's dream. At dawn, the ice was clear, the wind lower, the temperature a dry, burning cold that turned breath into brittle smoke. First, Dornier was prepared with supplies: tents, sledges, fuel drums, climbing gear, food rations calculated to the gram. The second carried a smaller load, and Dr. Malka. Richer came down to the launch deck in full polar gear, his beard already rimed with frost. He gathered the small group, the inland party of 8 men, around a crate and spoke softly so that only they could hear. "You know the official orders," he said. "You go to these coordinates, you document this formation, and you return. No heroics, no unnecessary exploration. The weather can devour you faster than any enemy." They nodded. Krauss stood among them, heart pounding faster than he liked. He had insisted on going when Richer first outlined the plan. "You need a signals officer," he had said. "If the radios fail again, I want to be there to see it." In truth, He did not trust Malka to be the only witness. The doctor stood a little apart now, adjusting his scarf, eyes fixed on the distant ice wall where the plateau began. "Remember," Malka added, "all photographs from this mission come to me first. All observations are to be recorded in writing as soon as possible. What you see is for the Reich, not for gossip." Kraus almost replied, but the engines drowned his words. The Dornier's propellers spun to life, their roar rolling across the deck. The catapult rail was slick with frozen spray, the sea a plate of shattered glass below. Men took their positions at the winches. The flight deck officer raised a red flag, held it a moment, then dropped it. The catapult hurled the aircraft forward into the white. For an instant, Kraus felt his stomach rise as the deck fell away. Then the world steadied, the Dornier climbing, the Schwabenland shrinking behind them into a gray smudge wrapped in its own exhaust. He looked out through the frost-rimmed window. Ahead, the continent waited, layer upon layer of ice and rock, stretching beyond comprehension. The coordinate point from Hartmann's last transmission glowed in his mind as if written in fire. Malka leaned forward from his seat, voice calm in the headset. "We fly 82 kilometers inland," he said, "land on the plateau near the cliff line, then we walk." "And if the weather turns?" Kraus asked. "Then we go faster," Malka replied. The pilot, Voss's replacement, said nothing. His hands were steady on the controls, eyes fixed on instruments that already trembled slightly as they climbed. Behind them, on the second aircraft, Vogel watched the fuel gauges with a logistical man's anxiety. Every liter burned here would have to be replaced on the secondary runs. Land too far from the cliff, and the sled journey becomes lethal. Land too close, and you risk hidden crevasses or falling ice. Numbers, he thought, always numbers. Weight, distance, fuel, calories, time. Somewhere far to the north, in Berlin, men made speeches about destiny, will, and blood. Here, destiny was measured in kilometers per hour and liters per minute. Here, will mattered only if the sled runners did not snap under load. The ice shelf fell away beneath them, replaced by rising terrain. Low hills at first, then sharper ridges. Ahead, through the haze, Kraus saw it. A darker line cutting the horizon, vertical and continuous. The wall. He felt his pulse quicken. "Altitude 900 meters, the pilot called, approaching target grid. The radio hissed, then cleared. For now the interference held off. Kraus keyed the transmitter. "Schwabenland, this is Inland Flight 1. Visual contact with cliff formation, preparing to circle." Static crackled, followed by Richer's voice, faint and distorted but recognizable. "Copy Flight 1. Maintain safety margin. No unnecessary risks." Malka smiled faintly, as if that phrase did not apply to him. The aircraft banked. The plateau below was smoother than Kraus expected, a vast white table beneath the towering cliff. The cavern mouth was visible now, larger than in the photograph, its darkness unnaturally sharp against the reflected light. The pilot exhaled slowly. "Flat enough to land, I think. Crosswind minimal." "Then we land," Malka said. The Dornier descended, skis scraping against the hardpack, bouncing once, twice, before settling in a spray of snow. The airframe groaned but held. The second aircraft made a wider loop and touched down farther back, kicking up its own halo of ice dust. Engines wound down, silence pressed in. Kraus stepped out into the Antarctic air and felt it bite his lungs through the scarf. The cliff loomed ahead, more immense now that they stood beneath it. He could not shake the impression that it leaned slightly over them, as if listening. The cavern waited in its shadow, black and patient. Behind him, men unloaded sledges, stacked fuel drums, checked rifle bolts with stiff hands. Vogel marked their landing coordinates in time, his pencil marking precise strokes despite the cold. Malky simply stared toward the dark entrance. "So," he murmured, "there you are." He turned to the others. "We proceed immediately," he said. "The ice does not care for our schedules. Let us not give it time to reconsider our presence." They harnessed themselves to the sledges and began to walk, boots crunching in unison on the ancient snow. With every step toward the cavern, the Schwabenland grew smaller in Kraus's mind, less a ship and more an idea, a promise of return that felt thinner than the air. The wind shifted, carrying a low, distant sound, a rumble that might have been ice cracking or something deeper. Kraus adjusted his grip on the rope and pushed forward. Somewhere in the frozen silence, Hartmann's last terrified gaze seemed to linger. The march across the plateau felt longer than the distance implied. 8 kilometers in such cold could stretch into eternity. The wind was a living thing, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a slow, deliberate push, that forced the men to lean their full weight against it. Krause's eyelashes froze together whenever he blinked. His breath crystallized on the inside of his scarf. The rope of the sledge bit into his gloves, numbing his palms. Each step creaked as if they trod on ancient bones buried beneath the snow. But the cavern grew larger with every stride, a black rectangle carved into the white world, a gate without a door. Cold air drifted from it, not colder than the outside, strangely enough, but different. Still, heavy, carrying a faint mineral smell that did not belong above ground. Malka walked ahead of everyone, unbothered by the wind, unburdened by the ropes. His silhouette cut neatly across the snow, a man in black against a horizon of bone white. Behind him trudged Vogel, his breath coming in mechanical bursts. His mind kept running the math, fuel remaining at base camp, 74%, distance to the ship's 82-kilometer, weather window, uncertain. Calories burned per man, 6,000 plus per day. Every variable screamed margin of error, Odkin death. Yet none of that mattered now, not with the entrance looming. At 300 meters out, the wind suddenly dropped, completely, as if cut with a knife. The silence was total. It swallowed their footsteps. Krause slowed. Windbreak from the cliff? No, Vogel said, rubbing frost from his goggles. This isn't a windbreak. It's something else. Indeed, the stillness felt unnatural, like the air had weight, as if the entire plateau exhaled, then held its breath. Malka didn't slow. Do not fall behind, he called back. We approach as a group. The cave mouth towered above them now, 50 meters high, maybe more. Its edges were too clean, too sharply defined, not chipped or eroded, but cut, as if a colossal blade had sliced through the rock ages ago. Ramps of old ice sloped gently downward from the entrance. The stone itself was almost smooth, the color of tarnished ivory. Photographs, Malka said. Krause raised his camera reluctantly. The shutter clicked, echoing faintly inside the entrance. The sound seemed swallowed instantly. When the flashbulb fired, the cavern's interior flickered into view for a fraction of a second, revealing columns of stone arching out of sight, vanishing into darkness. No stalactites, no debris, no natural chaos, just geometry. God, Vogel whispered. This was built. Malka turned. The faintest smile touched his lips. That is what I have been trying to tell you. Krause felt the bottom of his stomach drop. Built. By whom? Malka looked back into the cavern. By whoever was here first. They stopped at the threshold and set up a small forward camp, just 2 tents, a supply cache, and a stove. The cold radiating from the stone was sharp enough to fog their breath instantly. The cavern's entrance was vast enough to swallow their entire group without effort. Their lantern beams barely touched the stone walls. The ceilings vanished in shadow. The darkness beyond their light felt thick, almost tangible, like black wool. The men prepared climbing lamps, flare pistols, and redundant line spools for navigation. The doctor inspected every lamp himself, tapping the valves with gloved fingers. Inside the mess tent, Krause finally found a moment to scribble. The air inside the cavern is warmer. This is the first anomaly. Warmer, but denser. My ears popped entering. The stone is too smooth, the symmetry too perfect. Vogel believes erosion cannot account for shapes like these. The entire place feels designed. We should return to the ship, but Malka will not allow it. He paused, listening to the wind, or rather, the absence of it. Outside, tents rustled faintly, but beyond the canvas walls, the world was silent, the kind of silence that felt intentional. He added one more sentence. Hartmann died seeing this. They entered the cavern in 2 teams. Malka led the first, himself, Krause, Vogel, and 2 sailors armed with flare guns and ice axes. The second team remained at the camp to maintain radio contact. Their lanterns cast shifting cones of light that crept across the stone floor. The darkness absorbed everything beyond a few meters. The cavern did not feel like a cave. It felt like a great hall. The ceiling soared far out of sight. Their footsteps echoed in long, unnerving harmonics. Vogel's breath quickened. No frost inside, no ice. These walls have been shielded for decades, possibly centuries. Malka pressed his palm to the stone. Smooth, but not carved with tools, not in the way we understand. Kraus shined his lamp across the wall. The stone is fused. Melted? Heat, Vogel said quietly, but on a scale we cannot duplicate. They moved deeper. 10 meters, 20, 50. The entrance light faded behind them, till it was merely a pale ghost in the distance. The air inside grew warmer still, humid even. Condensation formed on Kraus's goggles. He wiped them and froze. Something ahead. Something massive. "Stop," he whispered. The others halted. A shape lay in the center of the hall, something dark, metallic, and distorted, half buried in silt and dust. Malka stepped forward slowly, lantern raised. When the light fell upon it, Kraus's breath caught. It was machinery, or had once been. A structure of metal plates bent inward as if crushed by immense pressure. Pipes emerged like ribs. A latticework of frames lay twisted, dusted with the sediment of ages. Not modern, not German, not anything recognizable. Vogel circled it, touching the metal with trembling fingers. Composition unknown, not steel, not aluminum. Too light for iron, too dull for silver, and the oxidation is peculiar. Malka knelt beside a broken panel. This is what Berlin needs to see. Kraus shook his head. This could be anything. Volcanic intrusion, a meteorite. We should... A sound cut him off. A low, steady, very faint, not air, not wind. The men stiffened. Vogel whispered, "What is that?" The hum grew slightly, resonating through the stone, not vibrating the air, vibrating them. Kraus felt it in his bones, in his teeth, behind his eyes. "Lanterns off," Malka ordered. Kraus hesitated. "Why?" "Off." The cavern plunged into darkness. The hum continued. Then something glowed. The broken machine, its interior seams faintly emitting pale blue light, as if some dying ember awoke after centuries of sleep. Lines on the metal flickered like veins. A soft pulse traveled along fractured pathways. Hartmann's last expression flashed through Kraus's mind, frozen terror. Vogel stepped backward, stumbling. "This is active. Malka, this thing is still active." "No," Malka whispered. "Not active, not alive, but responsive." The glow intensified for a moment, then died. A long, final exhale. Silence returned. The hum stopped. The air felt empty again. Malka finally spoke, voice hushed. "This machine was not made here, not on this continent, not in any world we know from history." Kraus felt his hands shaking. "We need to leave, now, before the weather closes, before this goes any further." "Further?" Malka turned slowly. "We haven't even begun." He lifted his lantern again. "Deeper inside," he said. "We follow the path. There will be more." Vogel grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? We just triggered who knows what. That glow. This thing has power, or memory, or..." Malka's calm was infuriating. "This cavern predates us by hundreds of centuries, perhaps thousands, and you think we should turn back because it breathed once?" "It didn't breathe," Vogel said. "It reacted." Kraus stepped between them. "Doctor, listen to reason. The ship is our lifeline. Our fuel is finite. The storm could return. And we don't know what killed Hartmann. We should pull back, regroup, and send the photographs to..." Malka's expression hardened. "You are not here to make decisions, Oberleutnant. You are here to obey." Kraus's jaw locked. The other sailors shifted uneasily. Malka faced the darkness again. "This place has waited millennia," he said softly. "It will not wait forever. We go on." He took 3 steps forward, then stopped. The lantern light revealed something on the wall, something Kraus did not want to see. Markings, symbols, lines carved into the stone, too straight to be natural, arranged in patterns that resembled writing or maps or warnings. Some lines were cut deep, others shallow. One pattern repeated 3 times along the wall, 3 concentric circles, intersected by a downward-pointing shape, like a spear or a plummet or an arrow falling from the sky. Malka approached slowly, mesmerized. "A script older than any known civilization," he murmured. a language of direction, of descent. Kraus felt something tighten in his chest. Descent to what? He whispered. The answer came not from Malka, but from the floor. A tremor, faint, just enough to stir dust. Then another. Vogel's lantern swung, casting dizzying shadows. Kraus whispered, "Is that the Earth, or—" "No," Vogel said. "It's closer, much closer." The tremor faded. Silence returned. Malka exhaled as if nothing were wrong. "We continue. Whatever powered this place is dormant now, harmless." But Kraus could not shake the feeling that the cavern was not dormant. It was listening. They took another step forward. The tremor returned, stronger than before, and this time Kraus heard something beneath the stone, something like a grinding, something like shifting plates, something like movement. Malka raised his lantern. A shadow moved at the far end of the cavern, not human, not animal, something else. Vogel froze, breath catching. Kraus whispered, "Doctor, what is that?" Malka's voice trembled with exhilaration, not fear. "What we came to find." The shadow moved again, slow, deliberate, impossibly smooth. And then the cavern floor cracked. The crack came first as a thin, sharp line, like a pencil mark on paper. Then it widened. A groan rose from the cavern floor, deep enough to vibrate their ribs. Dust fell in tiny cascades from the unseen ceiling. One of the sailors stumbled backward, raising his lantern as if the light could stop whatever was happening beneath their feet. Vogel whispered, "It's shifting. The whole plate is shifting, like a shell." Kraus's instincts screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to run to. The blackness behind them was as suffocating as the unknown ahead. The crack lengthened. A seam of pale blue light glowed within it, faint, pulsing. Kraus grabbed Malka's arm. "We're leaving. Now! That's not geology, that's a mechanism," Malka said softly, voice trembling with awe. "A machine beneath the cavern, a gate, a layer opening." Vogel wheeled on him. "It's a trap, Doctor. You saw the glow on the broken device. You saw the tremors. This place is still alive." Malka smiled, a thin, eerie smile. "That is precisely why we cannot turn back." The crack became a fracture. The fracture became a widening gap. A harsh hiss of stale, pressurized air shot upward from below. Air trapped for centuries, escaping like the dying breath of something ancient. The lantern light flickered wildly. Two sailors retreated toward the cave mouth. One raised a flare gun with shaking hands. "Sir, permission to fire a flare, for visibility." Malka didn't even look at him. "No, we preserve darkness," Kraus nearly shouted. "We need light," Malka snapped. "We need our eyes. Flares will blind us. This light, this faint glow, is more revealing." Kraus wanted to strike him. Vogel looked ready to do it for him, and then the rumble deepened. The eve. Stone beneath their boots shifted a full centimeter. A sickening, grinding motion reverberated through the cavern like the turning of a colossal gear. Vogel clutched his sledge pole. "This entire structure is mechanical. The floor plates, these are not stone. They're fused composite. They've been dormant. But something woke them." The seams split open with a final thunderous groan. A slab of the cavern floor, 10 meters across, lowered itself silently into the darkness as if carried by invisible machinery. Cold steam rose from the gap. The blue glow increased, brightened, intensified. Malky stepped forward, too close. Kraus lunged and grabbed him by the shoulder. "Are you insane? You don't know what's down there." Malka's voice was eerily calm. "I know enough. I know this predates every human structure on Earth. I know it was built, not formed. I know the Reich has no greater prize than this." The lowering platform eased to a stop, revealing a shaft descending into blackness. The sides of the shaft were lined with smooth, seamless material, not rock, not metal, not anything Kraus recognized, but the light came from below. A slow, pulsing radiance, like the heartbeat of something impossibly old. Kraus whispered, "This is wrong. This is all wrong." Vogel leaned over the edge, lantern extended. The light illuminated something beneath, just for a moment. A surface glinted, curved, polished, reflective. Then the glow faded again. Vogel recoiled as if burned. "There's something down there, something huge." Malka smiled faintly. "We descend." Kraus shook his head violently. "We ascend. We go back to the ship. We destroy the cameras if we must. We report nothing. This isn't our world. Malka stepped to the very edge of the shaft. Then I will descend alone. The sailors exchanged looks. One raised his flare pistol again, hands trembling, uncertain whether to use it as light or weapon. Vogel grabbed Kraus and hissed, "If he goes down there alone, we lose control. If he disappears, Berlin will send more. If he returns with whatever he finds, God help us." Kraus knew Vogel was right. The cavern trembled again. Dust fell like ash. Malka stood waiting, crazed devotion in his eyes. "Bind a rope. We descend together. History awaits." Kraus stared at him. "You don't want history. You want myth." Malka didn't blink. "History is myth until someone proves it true." They rigged a climbing line, anchored it around a natural column, checked the carabiners twice. Kraus went first. He hated that, but he needed to be ahead of Malka, between him and the unknown. The rope creaked as he eased into the shaft. Cold air rose from below, so cold it felt electric. He descended 10 meters, 15, 20. The shaft walls were smooth as glass. He lowered farther. The blue glow strengthened again. When his boots touched bottom, the shock nearly made him collapse. The floor was flat, perfectly flat, warm, not hot, just warm enough to be impossible. Vogel arrived next, panting. The thermal reading, my God, this shouldn't exist. Something is generating heat beneath us. Malka descended last, eyes shining. Magnificent. An intact chamber. Untouched. They lifted lanterns, and the chamber revealed itself. A circular room, 50 meters across. Walls sloped inward like the inside of a dome. The floor was made of the same fused material, almost ceramic, and at the center, a shape, the same reflective curve Kraus glimpsed from above, except now he could see more, a smooth hull, half buried in sediment, angled as if it had crashed or landed and then been swallowed by time. Not a vessel of water or air, something else. Vogel took cautious steps toward it, lantern shaking. He whispered, "It's metal, but not metal. It's light, lighter than it should be. And it's seamless, no rivets, no welds." Kraus could barely speak. "It can't be aircraft, not at that angle, and nothing fits the curvature." Malk circled the object almost reverently. "No engines," he noted. "No wing roots, no windows. A shape optimized for something else." He placed his hand on the hull. His breath caught. "It's warm." Kraus felt his heart hammering. "Remove your hand." Malka didn't. "Do you know what this means?" he whispered. "This is proof. Proof of an earlier intelligence. Proof that the Reich's destiny, our destiny, is tied to forces older than the pyramids, older than the ice." His voice grew fevered. "A technology beyond ours, a civilization lost, a birthright." Kraus snapped. "Stop calling it a birthright. It's a tomb." A hum filled the chamber, soft, low, familiar. The same hum from earlier. Malka stepped back, eyes wide. The hull pulsed faintly, once, twice, as if answering him. Vogel grabbed Kraus's arm. "We need to get out of here right now." The hum deepened. The chamber vibrated. Lines of faint light traced themselves across the hull. Patterns like the ones in the upper cavern. Rings, arrows, symbols of descent and ascent. Kraus raised his lantern. Malka whispered, "It's awakening." The chamber shook violently. A panel of the hull shifted, just a fraction, but enough to reveal a seam. Air hissed from within. Then a sound, a single soft tone, like something announcing its presence. The sailors panicked. One shouted upward, "Haul us out, now!" Vogel backed away, dragging Kraus. Malka stepped closer, arms outstretched, ecstatic, as if greeting God. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me." The seam widened. The chamber thundered, and a blast of pressure threw every man to the floor. The lanterns crashed, glass shattered, darkness consumed everything, and in the dark, something moved. The darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, Kraus couldn't tell if he was conscious or dreaming. The chamber rang with a metallic echo, as if the air itself had been struck. Dust floated in the blackness like drifting ash. Every breath tasted of minerals, and something faintly sweet, an odor completely alien to the Antarctic cold above. Kraus's hands groped across the warm floor until they found a shape. Vogel, groaning, his glasses cracked, his lantern smashed. From somewhere in the dark, A sailor shouted, "Light! Give us light!" Another voice, closer, strained with panic. "My eyes! Something flashed! God, I can't see!" Kraus forced himself upright. "Stay calm. Everyone, check your headlamps, matches, anything." Vogel fumbled with shaking fingers, pulled a spare match from an inner pocket and struck it. The tiny flame flared weakly. In that trembling light, Kraus saw the curved hull, no longer dormant, faintly glowing from its seams, dust swirling upward as if stirred by breath. Malka kneeling directly before the open panel, hands raised in rapture. One sailor crawling backward, eyes wide with terror. Malka's voice was a whisper, reverent and trembling. It spoke. Kraus stepped toward him. "It expelled AIR, Doctor. That blast was pressure release, not communication." Malka turned, pupils enormous, reflecting the faint light of the hull. "No, I heard intention. I felt it." Vogel grabbed Kraus's arm, voice trembling. "Forget the doctor. We have to leave. Whatever that thing is, it's active. We have maybe minutes before—" He gestured vaguely at the glowing hull. "Before something happens." The match burned his fingers. Vogel hissed, shook it out. Darkness again. Then Malka's silhouette shifted. A soft, low hum rose from the hull, the same frequency as before, but clearer now, steadier, almost melodic. Malka leaned in. "Do you hear that? It's patterned, structured. It's language." Kraus's voice cracked. "It's harmonic resonance through metal. You're hearing vibrations, not words." The hum strengthened, shaking dust from the ceiling. Something deep within the hull clicked, like an ancient latch unsticking. Then, a narrow beam of pale blue light shot from the opening panel, cutting through the darkness like a blade. The sailor closest to it screamed and tumbled backward. The light passed over his boots, instantly frosting them, as if freezing moisture out of the air itself. Kraus lunged and pulled him clear. "It's a coolant burst," Vogel shouted. "A compressed vent! Malka, get away from it!" But Malka did not move. He stood hypnotized, bathed in that unnatural glow, and the light, it lingered on him, as if studying him. Malka raised a trembling hand toward the illuminated seam. "Show me your purpose," he whispered. The chamber hummed louder. Vogel shouted, "Doctor, move!" Kraus ran for him, and in that instant, the light shifted. Color, from blue to white, from cold to blinding. A shockwave hit them, stronger than before. Kraus flew backward, slamming onto the floor, air punched from his lungs. Something metallic clanged through the chamber. Vogel collided with a pillar. The sailors dropped their gear, hands over their ears. When Kraus forced his eyes open, blinking away dizzy stars, he saw Malka, standing, but wrong. The light around him dimmed, revealing streaks of frost across his coat. His breath came out in ragged bursts. His pupils were blown wide, his expression blank. He turned toward them slowly. "Kraus," he whispered hoarsely. "It knows we're here." Kraus stared, heart pounding. "What? Knows we're here?" Malka shuddered. "The intelligence that built this, or the residue of its design. The machine holds memory, orientation, a function." Vogel dragged himself to his feet. "What did you see, Doctor?" Malka touched his temple. "Geometry, descent patterns, a network beneath the ice, a map?" The sailors exchanged terrified looks. Kraus approached cautiously. "Doctor," he said quietly, "we have to get out, now." Malka blinked slowly, as if waking from a trance. Yes, I think we must, but first," he gestured to the hull. "A sample, a fragment, for analysis." Vogel nearly choked. "You want to cut a piece off that thing? After it just nearly killed us?" Malka's voice hardened with fanatic certainty. "We take a sample. That's an order." Kraus grabbed him by the coat. "No, we're leaving. If you try to cut it open, it could—" The chamber trembled again, cutting him off. This time, the vibration was different, not mechanical, not structural, but rhythmic, like distant footsteps. Vogel stiffened. "That's not geological." The sailors backed together, raising tools like weapons. Kraus turned toward the dark end of the chamber. The humming ceased. Silence swept back into place like a suffocating blanket. Then, a single metallic clang echoed from deeper within the cavern. Not an echo, not a settling stone. Something moving, something reacting. Kraus's voice was barely a whisper. "Everyone back. To the line. Now." Malk stayed in front of the hull, staring into the dark. It's coming. Vogel's voice cracked. What is coming? Malk swallowed. The Guardian. Krause's blood ran cold. Guardian of what? Malk looked at the hull. Of this. The sound came again, closer, deliberate, footfall-like, metal on stone, too steady to be ice-breaking, too purposeful to be natural. One sailor shouted, "Climb! Climb up the rope!" Vogel grabbed Krause and shoved him toward the line. "You first, go!" Krause climbed, boots slipping on the wall's glassy surface. Vogel followed, panting, fingers numb. The sailors scrambled behind them. Then Malka's voice echoed from below. "I won't run from this." Krause looked down. "Doctor, move, now." Malk stood beside the glowing hull, staring into the advancing dark. The light from the seam illuminated only a few meters, but enough to reveal something emerging. A shape. Tall, angular, moving with fluid precision no machinery of their era could match. Its limbs were jointed, but wrong. Not hinged like a human, more like the folding of blades, segments rotating instead of bending. A construction designed for purpose, not resemblance. It stepped into the light. Vogel screamed. One sailor fired a flare in panic. The flare burst overhead, casting stark red light across the chamber. And the creature was revealed. Slim, metallic, graceful, silent, no eyes, just a smooth, faceless structure reflecting the flare's light. It turned its head, if that was its head, toward Malka. The doctor whispered, breath trembling with ecstasy and fear, "You're beautiful." The machine responded. A single resonant tone rang through the chamber, a harmonic note that froze the air. Then it moved. Faster than anything Krause had ever seen, not lurching, not running, gliding. Malka raised a hand. Whether in greeting or defense, Krause couldn't tell. The machine crossed the distance and touched him, just one light, precise touch. Malka froze, his body stiffened, his breath stopped, his lantern fell and shattered. Krause screamed, "Malky!" The machine withdrew its hand. Malky remained standing for a heartbeat, then collapsed like an empty uniform, silent, boneless, smoke curling from his collar. Krause's throat closed. "Holy God!" Vogel dragged him upward by his harness. "Climb! If you don't climb now, you die here." The sailors scrambled up the rope, boots slipping on the smooth walls, hands bleeding. Below, the machine turned toward them. The single tone sounded again, lower this time, angrier. Vogel's face twisted in terror. "It's tracking vibration. Run!" They climbed like men drowning. Halfway up the shaft, Krause risked a glance downward. The machine was scaling the wall, effortlessly, silently, climbing as if gravity was irrelevant. Krause's heart slammed against his ribs. "Move! Move! Move!" The men burst out of the upper cavern and staggered across the plate. The sailors hauled Vogel out. Krause kicked the rope loose, sending it plunging back into the shaft. The machine reached the top and struck the falling rope with a single motion, slicing it cleanly. Krause didn't wait to see anything else. "Run!" he roared. "Outside, now!" They sprinted toward daylight, lanterns forgotten, equipment abandoned. The cavern trembled behind them. Somewhere in the dark, the machine emitted another tone, louder now, echoing like a warning. The ice answered with a long, cracking groan. Vogel stumbled, nearly falling. Krause hauled him upright. They ran faster. Behind them, the machine's footsteps were soundless. But its presence felt closer. 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 Until the white glow of the cavern entrance finally appeared ahead. The men threw themselves toward it, as if toward salvation, and behind them, the thing in the dark followed. Snowblind light exploded into their eyes as they burst from the cavern's maw, stumbling into the open air. The contrast was disorienting. After the suffocating dark of the chamber below, the blinding Antarctic white felt like waking inside a lightning flash. Krause collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, every breath burning his lungs from cold and exertion. Vogel fell beside him, coughing violently. The sailors staggered in a chaotic cluster, some slipping on the hardpack as panic broke their coordination. Behind them, the cavern mouth yawned silently. Nothing emerged, no machine, no movement, just the still, patient darkness. Krause stared, trembling. "Did we, outrun it?" Vogel shook his head, voice hoarse. "No. It stopped. It chose to stop." One sailor paced madly in place, clutching his rifle. It killed Malka. It touched him, and he just, his voice cracked. Another sailor grabbed his shoulders. Quiet! If that thing hears, if it listens. Krause's pulse hammered. The air felt too quiet, too heavy, as if the continent itself were waiting for something. Finally, he whispered, "We regroup at the forward camp. Then we go straight back to the plains." Vogel nodded hard. Yes, full retreat, no debate. They reached the camp in minutes, a handful of tents shaken by the ever-present wind. The second team emerged, startled by the group's frantic arrival. The radio operator stepped forward. "Sir? We heard tremors from inside. What happened? Where is Dr. Ma—" Krause cut him off. "He's dead." Silence fell instantly, frozen silence. Even the wind seemed to lower its voice. Vogel added, "Pack everything. Fuel drums, too. Seal all crates. No delays." Sailors scrambled, stuffing tents, gear, rations into sledges. The forward camp transformed from a base to an evacuation site in seconds. The radio crackled weakly, sporadic static, no clear signal. Lines had been fragile since the team entered the cavern. Now the interference was near constant. "Try again," Krause ordered. The operator adjusted dials, tapped the tube amp, cursed softly. "Sir, there's something in the frequency, like a standing wave. It's blocking transmission." Krause stiffened. A standing wave? Vogel went pale. The machine, it's emitting something. Maybe not deliberately. Maybe its activation changed the electromagnetic environment. Krause's mind raced. If the machine's reawakening caused interference, a radio blackout meant no contact with the Schwabenland, no weather report, no emergency recall signal, no help. "Just keep trying," Krause said. "Switch channels, any channel." The operator nodded, twisting knobs with numb fingers. Krause turned to Vogel. "How long to reach the plains?" "If we leave now, 2 hours." "Then we leave now." The wind changed. Just as they began dragging the sledges, the wind blew sideways in an abrupt shift, sharp enough to slice exposed skin, strong enough to shake snow from the cliff edges above. Vogel looked up sharply. "Storm pattern. That's not natural. It's rotating too fast." Krause scanned the horizon. A wall of white was forming, a spiraling mass, a storm cell coiling on itself like a living thing. In Antarctica, storms usually announce themselves slowly. Pressure drop, cloud build, wind shift. This one birthed itself in minutes. A sailor shouted, "Sir, that's a whiteout front. If that hits—" "We move faster," Krause snapped. The life-or-death crawl began. Sledges creaked, ropes cut into gloves, faces burned from cold. Vogel kept counting under his breath. 6,000 calories a day just to walk. 8,000 if running. Why didn't we bring more glucose? It wasn't panic. It was math. The math of survival. The storm bore down behind them, a devouring wall of ice particles and screaming wind. Krause kept looking back at the cavern entrance, expecting, hoping, dreading, to see the machine emerge. But the cavern remained still, as if whatever dwelled inside didn't need to chase them, because the continent would do the work for it. Halfway across the plateau, Vogel suddenly stopped. "Krause." The tone cut straight to his spine. "What?" Vogel pointed. Across the snow, faintly visible, a series of depressions stretched outward from the cavern. Not footprints, too smooth. Not sledge tracks, too precise. Not cracks, too regular. Perfect, shallow circles, spaced evenly, leading directly toward their path. Krause whispered, "Tracks." Vogel nodded slowly. "It's moving, beneath the ice." Krause's blood froze colder than the air. "It's following us?" "Not following," Vogel said, swallowing hard. "Intercepting." A sailor screamed, "Run! Don't stop! Run!" They ran. The storm hit like a wall. Visibility collapsed to nothing, just swirling white and the shadowy blur of the man immediately ahead. The wind howled at 70 knots, hammering their bodies, knocking them sideways. Snow tore across their goggles like sandpaper. Time fractured. Movement became instinct. Each step a prayer. Somewhere behind them, the plateau groaned, the deep, terrible sound of ice shifting far below. Vogel shouted through the wind, "It's under us!" Krause grabbed the rope line linking their group. "Do not lose the line! Hold tight!" The ground shuddered. Snow leaped upward in a ripple. Something passed beneath them, fast, smooth, silent, except for the tremor it left in its wake. A sailor stumbled. Another pulled him up. The ice heaved again, this time directly beneath the rear sledge. The last man screamed as the sledge toppled and vanished into a sudden fissure. Kraus whirled. "Hellman! Hellman!" But the crack sealed instantly like lips closing. The wind devoured the scream. The snow erased all trace. Vogel stared at the fresh seam in horror. It didn't kill him. It took him. Kraus forced himself to move. "Go! Move!" They abandoned the fallen supply sledge. They trudged onward, the storm ripping at their very bones. Minutes blurred, or hours. Then a shape emerged, the two Dornier planes, barely visible through the white chaos, their forms distorted by blowing ice. One sailor cried out, "We're saved!" But Kraus felt a sinking dread. No movement, no figures, no engine warmth. The landing party that stayed with the planes, 4 men, should have been preparing for immediate liftoff. Instead, the camp was silent. The storm paused for a heartbeat, giving them just enough visibility to see the truth. The second plane's cockpit canopy was cracked, not shattered outward, but inward, as if something had entered or exited. Frost rhymed the opening. Vogel whispered, "Where are they? The aircrew, where are they?" Kraus stepped toward the camp. A sailor found the first body behind a fuel drum. Frozen, eyes open, no wounds. The second body lay beside the plane. Same condition, frozen stiff as if caught mid-motion. Vogel knelt, breath trembling. Flash frozen, instantly, no struggle, like Malka. Kraus closed the man's eyes. "We're leaving," he said, "right now." They piled into the first Dornier, the only one whose engines appeared undamaged. Vogel jumped into the co-pilot seat, fingers numb as he checked gauges. Fuel at 62%, enough, barely. A sailor slammed the hatch, another strapped down the loose cargo. Kraus looked back through the snow and froze. The storm wall was shifting, not randomly, deliberately. A shape moved within it, a tall, slender silhouette, half seen, half suggested, its outline distorted by the blizzard as if the storm wrapped itself around its form. It stepped once, and the snow parted around its legs. Kraus's voice cracked. "Go! Go now!" Vogel hit the ignition. The Dornier's engines sputtered, coughed, roared to life. The propellers chopped the ice-laden air, throwing snow backward in a furious spray. The shape in the storm stepped closer. Kraus saw no face, just smooth metal reflecting stormlight. "Faster!" he shouted. "Take off!" Vogel pushed throttle forward. The Dornier lurched, sliding across the rough snow, engines straining. The runway was barely long enough. The wind was murderous. The machine stepped into view again, walking parallel to the plane, keeping pace, and then a terrible, harmonic tone rang across the plateau, the same tone that killed Malka. The plane's instruments flickered, fuel gauge spasmed, compass spun, radio died with a shriek of static. "It's disrupting systems!" Vogel screamed. "It's targeting us!" The plane bounced violently, skis scraping across uneven ice. The machine raised an arm, the same delicate, terrifying motion that froze a man in seconds. Kraus grabbed the pilot's shoulder. "Pull up! I'm trying!" The second harmonic struck. The engine sputtered, then caught, then surged with dangerous power. The nose lifted. The Dornier shuddered, struggled, then lifted off the plateau just as the machine reached the edge of the cliff. For a split second, Kraus met its faceless, reflective surface. The machine tilted its head, not in confusion, not in anger, in recognition. Then, the snow wall swallowed it again. The plane climbed into the stormy sky. Silence filled the cabin except for ragged breathing. Vogel stared straight ahead. "Dear God," he whispered, "what have we awakened?" Kraus had no answer, just the terrible certainty, as the white world fell away beneath them, that the machine was not confined to that cavern. It had been dormant. Now it was aware, and Antarctica had never been empty. The Dornier bucked violently as it clawed through the storm. Outside the windows, the world was nothing but white chaos, snow whipping sideways, sky and ground indistinguishable. The plane felt impossibly fragile, a thin metal shell hurled through the wrath of a continent that wanted them dead. Kraus clung to the fuselage framing to keep from being thrown across the cabin. One sailor was praying, another vomiting into a ration tin. The last two sat stone still, eyes hollow, hands clutching their harnesses with bone-white knuckles. Vogel fought the controls, every muscle trembling with fatigue and fear. "I need altitude," he shouted. "If we stay this low, the ice drafts'll—" The Dornier dropped several meters in a single stomach-wrenching plunge. Kraus slammed into his seat. "Can you climb?" "It's too heavy," Vogel said, "and the storm is—" A deep harmonic tone rumbled through the cockpit. Kraus's blood froze. "No! No, no, no!" The instruments flickered. The fuel gauge spasmed again. Needles shook violently as if vibrating to an invisible rhythm, the same rhythm they'd heard in the chamber. Vogel's eyes widened. "It's following us." Kraus stared into the storm ahead. "We can't see it." "That doesn't mean it's not there." The tone rose again, a perfect frequency, cold and pure. The plane dipped sharply to the right, almost rolling onto its side. Vogel wrestled the control column back to center. "We've lost aileron sensitivity." Another harmonic pulse. The left engine sputtered and died. The Dornier lurched into a spin. Sailors screamed. Gear slammed against the fuselage. Snow blasted through a crack near the cabin door. Kraus grabbed Vogel's shoulder. "Feather it! Feather the prop!" "I'm trying!" Vogel shouted, sweat freezing on his brow. "The controls aren't responding. Something's overriding the—" But the sentence broke, because suddenly the harmonic tone stopped. Dead silence filled the cockpit. The left propeller spun freely now, windmilling, but no longer fighting the engine. Vogel pulled the feathering lever again. This time it worked. The propeller froze in place. The plane stabilized, barely, fighting the storm with one engine. The sudden calm was almost worse than the terror. Kraus felt every hair on his arms rise. What just happened?" he whispered. Vogel swallowed. "It let us go." The men stared into the blinding white ahead. Kraus found his voice again. "Why would it let us go?" Vogel didn't answer, because there was no answer. Only the storm, only the continent, only the certainty that the machine had chosen to release them for reasons no human mind could understand. The storm thinned gradually. Shreds of cloud peeled away, revealing faint patches of pale blue. Snow lessened. Wind slowed. An hour passed, or perhaps a lifetime. Their watches had frozen or shattered. Time had become untrustworthy. Then, "See ice ahead," a sailor called. Vogel pressed his forehead to the ice-streaked window. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, that's the coastal shelf. If we follow it west," Kraus leaned forward, "we'll reach the ship." The Schwabenland. Hope flickered weakly in his chest. As they descended, the shelf grew larger, a jagged white edge above the gray-black sea. The Dornier angled toward it, one engine whining with strain. Then, Vogel saw something. Smoke, thin, black, drifting across the ice like a dying banner. Kraus saw it next. His stomach dropped. No. When the ship came into full view, the cabin fell silent. The Schwabenland was listing sharply to starboard. Its hull was cracked open along the waterline. Ice floes pressed against its broken bow. The deck was collapsed in the middle, metal twisted as if crushed by unimaginable pressure. No movement, no figures, no signals. A cemetery at sea. Vogel whispered, How is that possible? Storm damage, collision with ice?" Kraus's voice was flat. "No storm crushes steel like that." The sailors stared, numb. Vogel set the Dornier down on relatively smooth ice. The landing was rough, skidding, bouncing, but they remained intact. As the propeller wound down, the silence of Antarctica pressed in around them again. Empty, endless, judgmental. Kraus stepped out first. His boots touched the ice with a hollow thud. The wrecked ship loomed ahead, a grave marker against the horizon. They approached slowly. The closer they came, the worse it became. Bodies were frozen on the deck, no wounds, no struggle. Faces contorted in fear, exactly like Malka, exactly like the aircrew. "Killed instantly," Vogel murmured, voice cracking. "Flash frozen. Did the same signature." Kraus touched one sailor's coat. It was brittle as glass. Feet crunched on shattered deck planks, splintered, not by explosion, but by crushing force, as if something had pressed downward from above. Vogel stared at the twisted metal. "I've seen ice-crushed ships. I've seen pressure hulls collapse, but this is surgical." Kraus stopped at the bow rail. A familiar camera was embedded in the frost, Hartmann's camera. The film canister was missing. He swallowed hard. The machine came here, Vogel trembled. Why? Why kill them? Why destroy the ship but let us live? Kraus looked across the frozen sea. Fog rolled over the water surface, thickening, coiling, darkening. Inside that fog, something moved, a silhouette, impossible to see clearly, tall, angular, silent. Vogel saw it too. He clutched Kraus's sleeve. Kraus, is that? Kraus shook his head. No, look, the fog shifted. The silhouette wasn't approaching, it was watching. And then, slowly, it stepped backward and vanished into the white. They found the ship's emergency transmitter, half buried in ice. Vogel and Kraus dragged it free, set it on a crate, and hooked the leads to a surviving battery. The vacuum tubes warmed, static hissed. A faint carrier tone stabilized. Vogel cupped his hands around the microphone. Kotztown Base, do you read? This is the Schwabenlands Expedition Flight Team requesting immediate rescue. Coordinates, static. He adjusted dials, changed frequencies, tried naval channels, whaler channels, emergency channels, nothing. The harmonic interference was gone. But the burst of energy from the machine must have fried the long-distance receiver. Vogel whispered, "No contact, no long-range capability, only short wave." Kraus stared at the frozen horizon. "Someone will come for the ship eventually, months from now, a year. We just have to survive." Vogel looked as if he might collapse. Only one sailor dared speak. "Sir, how do we survive without food, without heat, without fuel, without the ship's stores?" Kraus forced his voice steady. "We'll salvage everything we can. We'll rig emergency shelters. We'll ration fuel from the plane." He stopped. The sailor was staring behind him. Slowly, Kraus turned. On the ice beside their crashed equipment, something lay there, a small metallic object, smooth, shapeless, about the size of a fist. It hadn't been there minutes earlier. Vogel picked it up with shaking fingers. It was warm. He nearly dropped it. "Kraus, this isn't scrap. This is a fragment from it." Kraus's chest tightened. The sailors backed away, murmuring. From somewhere beyond the fog, a soft harmonic tone echoed, so faint it could have been imagination, so faint that only fear made it audible. Vogel's voice cracked. "Kraus, it didn't let us live out." "Of mercy." Kraus looked at the horizon, at the fog rolling like breath, at the white continent stretching endlessly. "No," he whispered, "it let us live so we would carry a message." Vogel held up the fragment, horrified. "What message?" Kraus stepped forward, eyes scanning the rising mist. "That Antarctica is not empty." The fog thickened. The tone sounded again. And the last surviving men of the Nazi expedition realized the truth. They were not rescued. They were released. The machine had chosen not to kill them because the continent had no need for more corpses. It needed witnesses. Far in the distance, the silhouette moved again. Once, then vanished. Kraus lifted the logbook from his coat pocket. His last entry began. "If anyone finds this, know the ice is not what we believed. Know that beneath this continent lies an intelligence older than the Reich, older than the species, older than the idea of nations. Know that we trespassed and were spared only because we are irrelevant. Know that the expedition did not fail. It was warned." He closed the book. The wind carried the low hum one last time, a sound that seemed to say, "Leave. Leave now." Kraus whispered into the frozen air, "We're leaving." He turned to the others. "Pack the transmitter. Bring the fragment. We start moving north. Someone will find us." Vogel stared at the fog. "And if it follows?" Kraus didn't look back. "It won't need to." The storm answered with silence.